Okay, I'd like to call to order the Urban Design Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 9th, 2010. We have a roll call.
Mark Kimmerer,
Here.
Douglas Gazek,
Here.
Patrick Coleman, James Doherty,
Here.
Jim Sawhill,
Here.
Andrew Garcia,
Here.
Patricia Joyner,
Here.
Jeff Dinwiddie, Thomas Tybor.
I didn't see any minutes in our packet, so we'll move on to special order business. Are there any disclosures to be made?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a conflict of interest with our one and only case tonight. We have a contract with the Trust Land Office, who owns property along 40th Avenue, and they have evidently written a letter wanting to speak on this, and I don't feel that it would be appropriate for me to participate in this project, or this case.
And we don't have an issue of being short-handed or not having a quorum.
No, you've got just at 5 at that.
Okay, we'll excuse you from that.
There'd still take a vote by a short board vote, right?
Yeah, it's a short board.
Okay.
And we need a motion to direct him to participate in the record.
Okay, I'm advised that we're going to have to take a vote to direct Commissioner Sawhill to participate. So, may I have a motion? Well, it has to be a positive motion. That's just the way it works. And if you don't think it's appropriate for him to participate, you would vote against. Yes. So I'm waiting for a motion. Commissioner Kimmerer?
Yes, I move that Commissioner Sawhill participate in UDC case 2008-035.
Okay, that's been seconded by Commissioner Gazek. Do we use our voting buttons or? Okay. Okay, please use your voting buttons. Oh, it would be the ones on electronic, right? Okay, the motion fails, and he would be excused. So next we move to the consent agenda, and I would ask, since we've just been given a new packet of information, if we could take a recess of approximately 5 minutes so the commissioners have a chance to read the new information that's been submitted. So we'll take a short recess and get back to this in 5 to 10 minutes. Do I really have to? Oh. All right, we're back in session after our short recess to read this new supplemental packet that was given to us. So we have the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve? Make a motion to pull. Do you want to pull the case?
Do we make the motion if we plan to make a motion to appeal? I mean, to pull it?
I would suggest, I'd recommend basically saying we're at the consent agenda, and does anyone want to pull something, and if the only item is pulled, then a motion wouldn't be necessary, and I think that's the way we...
Right. The consent agenda has one case on it. Does anyone wish to pull that case?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull that case.
Okay. So we'll move to the regular agenda. And do we have questions? I understand. Staff, do you wish to clarify this new document that you've given us?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Trust Land Office submitted to the Planning Department a memo with associated attachments this afternoon. That information has been laid on the table for the Commission. They are in attendance, as well as the petitioner for this case, which is the Project Management and Engineering Department. The Commission can approve the consent agenda without discussion, or pull the case and discuss the case. The UDC can ask questions of both the petitioner and of this property owner, can ask questions, and then make a decision on whether or not to, approve the amendment to the landscape plan, make changes to the landscape plan, or to postpone to a future meeting, say the July meeting. The UDC's responsibility is to evaluate landscape plans based on their merits, and also how they may affect neighboring properties. So you're supposed to look at the landscape plan. But the UDC has no authority over private agreements, such as the objection of the Trust Land Offices appears to be with about their public use agreement with Project Management Engineering. I can also, just one last point, what a public use easement is, for the benefit of all, is it's an encumbrament across property. So if I'm a private property owner, I may have a utility easement over it. That means that a portion of my property, it's still my property, but it is encumbered for the use of the utility, and the utility has rights to go in there and do what they need to do. It's same with the public use agreement. The public being for a public purpose, the municipality may use the private property owner's property for their purpose, and that appears to be the agreement here. The two different groups in attendance can speak to issues should the Commission want to question them.
I have a question of you, and forgive me if this sounds slow, but typically we have a concept plan review and we have a final review. The final review appears on the consent agenda. In this case, what is on the consent agenda is an amendment to what has already been approved. And this feels like new territory for me. Perhaps this is standard procedure in other commissions, but I don't recall taking this kind of action before. So we have to kind of wade our way through this, because this feels, not only is it strange that this is an amendment, but then that there's some objection to the amendment that we've received at the last hour. So we'll kind of wade forward, and I'd ask if any of the petitioners have questions of let's see, PM&E or of this group.
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Yeah.
So it's true that the Commission typically sees concept or preliminary review and then final review. There are times when the final plan, after it's approved by the Commission and a resolution is written, there are times when minor changes are made to the final landscape plan. If they are so minor and they're not covered by the findings of the Commission, then they may be administratively changed. That is to say, staff may review to see if it's still in conformance with and the intent of the approved plan, and may grant, stamp the plans as changed if they're minor enough. the Project Management Engineering Department came to the Planning Department with the changes that they felt that they needed to make, and the Planning Department in this case felt that the changes were big enough that they needed to be brought before the Commission to be approved. So if the Planning Department had deemed these changes to be so small, we would have just approved it, stamped it, and you would have never seen it. But because the changes appeared to be large enough, the Planning Department scheduled this for the hearing before you now. So just that's a little bit of the history.
Well, in the description of what our options were, so just pulling from the consent agenda, I just want more clarification. If we reject this amendment, does that obligate PM&E to construct the original plan that we already approved, or is that no longer practical or possible? I mean, what happens if we issue a no in this case?
You're correct. If the Commission has the authority to decide on matters of the landscape plan, and site, well, in this case, it's just the landscape plan, though, because this is a case from last year. But so yes, you're correct. If the Commission can approve the change, deny the change, or change the amendment and the petitioner is here in attendance, you could speak with the landscape architect that designed the plan and project management engineering regarding any of these issues.
Okay. Commissioners have questions?
Just a quick question for staff. In light, I guess this is new information. You just received it yesterday or today.
This afternoon.
This afternoon. Would it change your department recommendation on the staff?
Thank you, Mr. Kimmer. No. Should we postpone the case for a month? Planning would ask you to hang on to your packets because the department recommendation would remain unchanged. The staff's position that this is a civil matter and not within the issue of the objection of a private property owner is not within the purview responsibility of the Commission. The Commission should look at the landscape plan and determine whether or not these amendments that PM&E is proposing make sense or not.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Joyner?
Well, this seems unusual to me because, and I'm just wondering how it came about, because most of these changes were recommendations from municipal staff and had already gone through concept and final and been approved. It seems unusual to me that after all of that and a big public process, then people in the municipality would be reviewing it at that point and making changes. And I know sometimes there's little things when they get on the ground that change, but and maybe these didn't seem big, but obviously they were big to some people, and it makes me wonder about all of the others. Are they also things that if people knew about them, they might object to too because they think that it's a done deal? Or am I misinterpreting that?
I think that you raised some good points through the chair. Ms. Joyner, thanks for your comments. The final landscape plan was approved by consent agenda. There was no public notice of it at all. That is to say that the public did not receive a public mailer, there was no public testimony. The public doesn't have doesn't become made aware of these public facility road project plans except through the public involvement process that project management engineering undertakes. They've had several meetings with stakeholders and that, but so I guess staff would disagree that making changes to the final landscape plan doesn't, you're not contradicting like public will or shortchanging the public the opportunity to comment, because they didn't any comments that they made were prior to those hearings. I'd also say that the final landscape plan was approved March 11th, 2009. For some reason, and I don't have that information, I apologize, the petitioner does, but that project wasn't built in the summer of 2009 as I think it was planned to. So now, a year later, in the summer of 2010, they're ready to construct, and now there are changes. I think that they would explain they want to amend the plan, and they have justification. They would say that they have logical reasons for asking for these amendments.
Any other questions? The Commission? Commissioner Gassick?
Yeah, I just have to reiterate what Commissioner Joyner and what was previously mentioned already is that this is a little bit strange, and I think it falls outside the parameters of this case a bit, but I think we have to kind of know as a Commission where is that line when it comes back to us and when it's just handled as a staff review, because it's completely not clear to me, so maybe that should be defined at some point a little bit more clearly.
Through the chair, Mr. Gassick, yes, you're right. There are no clear parameters of what constitutes a minor amendment to a plan or what's a major change to a plan. It's really done on a case-by-case basis. Either the petitioner's representative or the owner of the project will come to us and say there's been some changes to the project. Do you think it needs to go back to UDC or not? And one of us will take a look at it, and if we feel it's minor enough, we'll say no, and we will sign off and we'll give it an administrative approval, meaning that someone in the planning department will look at it and review it and stamp it and say it's fine to go on as it is. If we think the change is significant enough, then we decide it needs to come back to the Urban Design Commission for their review and approval. And in this case, we thought the changes were significant enough that they needed to come back and be reviewed and approved by the UDC. But there are no hard and fast rules as to what constitutes major change and a minor change.
You know, just going with our standard information about late public hearing submittal information, we do have the option as a commission, if this does make us feel uncomfortable per our guidelines, to delay this 30 days to hear this at our next meeting, and perhaps that gives us more time. I'm just concerned, Sharon and Francis, this supplemental packet, it includes some sort of rendering, three-dimensional things that may relate to how this looks and feels. I think when we first saw this case, we were looking at some very detailed three-dimensional perspectives of what this project would look like, and this is, basically an unreadable, something that maybe should be in color or should be given to us, and I just don't feel that I can, me personally, don't think that I can weigh the merits of what the aesthetic impact of these changes are, given the quality of this information that's been furnished to us. So, just for the Commission's benefit, we do have that option as opposed to an actual motion after we get our questions heard tonight. Commissioner Dinwiddie, you had a question?
I guess I got two comments. One, it's a short summer, so I would say that we do our best to hear this right here and now, and we're all fairly well educated, and if it can be, I think we discussed it prior to just tabling it, because if we delay this 30 days, it may not even get started this year. It's already June, first week of the end of June, and notice of completion, it won't happen. That being said, the other issue that this kind of speaks to is I sent all you guys an email, and this is a little bit off course, but still on topic, is, Martin Luther King Jr. Drive went through this same process, and then the actual what got actually built in the plan for landscaping wasn't anything that, it was a gross variation of what this board approved. So that's kind of speaks to the subject. What are we doing if changes happen after we approve something? Where is that gray area, and where is the responsibility for staff to, I mean, that arbitration line seems to be stretched to the hilt, and wherein does it become an issue where we recall a case that doesn't go the way that we approved and the conditions that we set on a job? How do you deal with that as a commission? Otherwise, are we just wasting our time?
We went there when I brought it up. I mean,
So in this instance, your preference would be that the work does come before the commission before construction begins, and we do rule on any kind of amendments or changes?
Yes.
Yeah. Francis, you had something else you wanted to add?
One option, a point of information for the commission. The commission can discuss this case amongst themselves, discuss the positive and negatives that they see of these amendments, can ask questions of the petitioner or private property owners. The trust land office is present. And then after they've asked all their questions, after you have asked all of your questions, then you can decide whether or not to make a motion and approve or deny or change or postpone the case. So it's not a decision you have to make right now. You can continue to discuss the case and discuss the changes and ask questions of people.
Okay. Commissioner Joyner, you have a question?
Well, just to follow up, because in case I wasn't clear, but maybe it's because of the delay. I just didn't understand why street maintenance and the forester and the landscape architect and all these people were reviewing this with an eye toward making changes after the final was approved. I mean, didn't they see it before, or did things change so much that they said, oh, now we have new information? It just seems like the review and those recommendations should have been before it came to us, not a year after it was approved.
See, the Chair, Ms. Joyner, you raise a good point, and it's exactly the point that I raised with PM&E when I met with them. I think they were unaware that when they were making major changes to street projects, that they needed to come back to the Urban Design Commission to have it reviewed and get their approval. I think they were going along the lines of what it says there, that if the project landscape architect and the project, and the arborist and the municipal forester were all in agreement that these changes, along with the project engineers, were all in agreement that these changes were needed and a good idea, then they were just going forward with it. I said, no, that's not how the system works. UDC has final approval over these projects, and if there's significant changes, then you need to let me know, and then I need to, decide whether these are minor changes that staff can administratively approve, or the major changes and they need to go back to UDC. We had a meeting to discuss those points. PM&E now understands what the role of the UDC is, and now what their role in these regarding these major changes to projects. And so I think there's a common understanding now that if there are major changes to projects, they need to let me know so I can, bring them back, or Francis, we can bring them back to the UDC. So we think we've got those sorted out now.
But did all these people review it before it came to us the first time?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Did all these people review it before it came to us the first time?
I know the arborists they did. I think even the municipal forester has been on, 2 years now? So I'm certain, whether or not he's been here, but whether or not the plans were sent over here for his review, I couldn't tell you.
And certainly street maintenance was here 2 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
Questions for either the petitioner or the trust land office, the commissioners?
I guess I would like to hear everybody's side. I just want to know if this is something that can be resolved, maybe a presentation from the trust land office to kind of clarify what the issue is, if possible.
Okay. Do we have a representative of trust land office? And my understanding, Commissioner, is that because this is on a consent agenda, we're supposed to limit this to questions
Okay.
of the presenters rather than to have a full-blown presentation.
Right.
Hello, my name is Lauren Bisha. I'm with Lounsbury Associates, and we're contracted with the Trust Land Office. Tim Spernak of the Trust Land Office was unable to be here tonight, and he asked me to come and represent him and answer any questions that you may have. The Trust Land Office owns Tract C2, which is approximately 4.5 acres, located north of 40th and between Laurel and Volker Street. The Trust Land Office, their primary objection is to item 1 of the Dowd letter, which is removal of trees along the north side of 40th Avenue. We are in the process of finalizing a grading plan for Tract C2 and do not believe the municipal forester was fully aware of our project before he made his landscaping comments. In the letter that the Trust gave you, there's Exhibit 2, which is the site grading plan. And as you can see from that site grading plan, we will be grading down into essentially 2 flat plateaus. Each plateau will be approximately 2 acres in area, and the slopes on those, that finished grade on those 2 plateaus will be ranging between 1% and 3%. If you look at the exhibit that shows the sectional views, you'll see, particularly on the one that shows the north-south, that once the city comes through with 40th Avenue, we will be removing the remainder of that hill. We believe that the resulting area draining into from Tract C2 into the 40th Avenue swale will be negligible, and that the trees along the north side of 40th Avenue will survive and should remain as approved. Currently, our schedule is to have our project out to bid this fall, and in late October be clearing and start the excavation first thing next summer.
Any additional questions?
I guess I'll pose it as a question this time. So what's the deal breaker, Lauren? Is it that their revisions to the landscape plan have affected how you want to grade your site?
No, it doesn't affect how we want to grade our site. It was just something that they were planning on seeing, and it affected the value of the property.
Because of existing trees?
The landscaping.
Okay.
Commissioner Dinwiddie?
How many trees are you talking about? Existing trees that'll be. We're
not talking about the existing. We're talking about the proposed landscaping. The trees that will be within the 40th Avenue landscaping plan.
So these proposed trees on the UDC-approved plan on the north side, street trees, now they don't have those, and that's the issue?
Yes.
Wasn't a retaining wall removed too? Wasn't that?
There at one time was going to be a retaining wall, and now they got a TCE from the Trust Land Office, and they're laying the slopes back to a 3-to-1.
On our sheets, where is your tract, your property? Do you have a...
I don't have the sheets in front of me, but it says station 20.
So, Lauren, it's this right here. So they're removing these trees.
Yes.
35 Columnar aspen, it looks like. They're gone.
So, just for my clarification, and help me out, landscape guys. So the bottom drawing on Exhibit A is the proposed design, and the top one was what we had approved, correct?
I guess my question would be to staff. what, on the back side, on the proposed plan, the sidewalk runs along this track, C2, and the sidewalk still remains, there's light posts along the bike path on the proposed. What's the slope variations coming off that sidewalk into the property?
Through the chair, Mr. Dinwiddie, I had asked that you direct that question to the landscape architect who designed the project and the petitioner. They can speak to those issues. There's, as Lauren just stated, there's proposed to be a 3-to-1 slope, and what I think that PM&E will talk about is the lack of space and issues with drainage.
I have no further questions for Mr. Beschia.
Commissioner Joyner, is your question directed? Okay.
So I was just wanting to clarify, so your concern is if those trees aren't planted, your property values are less. You want the trees planted?
No, what my concern is when the trust land office was negotiating this, these were the plans that were presented to them, and that's what they want to see, and that was what they feel they, was part of not part of the negotiations, but it was part of the package of that 40th Avenue that was going to be coming through and when they were setting up that easement.
But the only change is keep the trees that the municipal forester said we should not plant because of the swale. Is that the only change that'd be made?
Yes, and from on the north side.
So this is the first that someone would come and ask for trees to be retained, because it's always been the other for every meeting I've been at. But I just wanted to clarify that that's the only change, is that the trees would be planted instead of deleted.
Yes.
And, okay, thank you.
And we may want to ask the designers whether that is in fact the intent. Commissioner Garcia.
I had a question upon your clearing and grubbing comment earlier. So what was your access point going to be for clearing and grubbing?
We have one access point off of Laurel.
Oh, it's off of Laurel?
Yes.
So those trees wouldn't be affected by your clearing and grubbing activities?
No.
They'd almost be like a natural barricade to conceal what's happening back there and probably lend to a more aesthetic
Yes, I will.
scene from 40th? Okay. That's just what I was inquiring about.
Commissioner Dinwiddie?
I guess from a practical standpoint, there's a $10 million road improvement, and you're talking about 35 trees worth $300 a piece. That's $9,000. While an easement that you did give, I'm pretty sure that for maybe even less than $9,000, I think it's a good trade-off for the value of your property to get a $10 million project pushed through. I think that increase alone pretty much negatively, from someone who just had a road project put through on a property and actually gave an easement to the DOT, I think the final value to your property far exceeds the price of 35 trees, and that can be negligibly added to your project in a sense if you feel that the trees could be. I think we should push forward with this and discuss it, but that's just my 2 cents in a sense that the value increase for this road project to your property increases this value far exceedingly than 35 trees.
Increasing the value of the property was my statement. It wasn't TLO's. I just want to make that clear. And there wasn't something that they have ever said. It was just when they were working on this easement and stuff, these were the final plans that they had approved for them, and that's what they were planning on seeing.
Yeah, I'm concerned we're kind of on a slippery slope, commissioners. Remember what the role of the UDC is to comment on landscaping, not on easement grants or property values or any of those kinds of things. We need to comment on the landscaping plan that's before us and try to keep that mission in mind as we're reviewing this case. Commissioner Gassick.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the public involvement, since that was raised as an issue in the letter. I was just wondering how long the Trust Land Office had been under the impression that this was going to be the design for the road project, and about how many meetings had been discussed. And then as a follow-up to, I'm going to throw it out there right away, and then when did they learn about this change?
We just came under contract earlier this year, so some of my previous work I can address. We had started our public involvement process by going to the community councils, and we're just getting this project rolling. We've been meeting with McLaughlin and API, and we're addressing their concerns right now, and we're hoping to finalize our grading plan and get going on the permit. But how long they've known about this, I can honestly answer that. I just got a call today at 4 o'clock to show up because Tim was sick. So.
Okay, I can find some of that out from the petitioner too. Thanks.
Any other questions for our representative for TLO? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the petitioner? We could have the petitioner come forward. We do have a question. If you'd introduce who you are.
Sure. Members of the Commission, my name is Robert Owens. I'm with the Municipal Law Department. I've got Julie Mackler here from PM&E, and Kevin Denier, who's here from Dow, who's the landscape architect.
Okay.
Preliminarily, if you will, the big concern the reason this is presented because it is considered to be a significant change in that the trees are being removed, and it does modify the final plans. That is the only point about the proposed amendment that is being contested. The others, of course, are clear and unobjectionable. And really the sticking point from PM&E's point of view is that they've been advised these trees won't survive in the current layout, and so it would be wasteful to attempt to install them. And while they're sympathetic to the trust's position, it's speculative at this point as to whether the plans that they have for their property are actually going to go forward. And to modify the project plans on the hope that they will actually complete that work would be imprudent and perhaps wasteful. There's going to be not the swale, as Julie is capable of explaining, is really more than just a swale. There's subsurface French drains, there's collectors on either end, there's engineering involved in all of this. And so a significant modification to enable the trees to survive along there would be quite a change. And so the intention at this point would be to proceed according to the plans as they are presently approved and ready to go. And we can't afford to step back and attempt to determine whether the adjacent landowners' plans ever come to fruition.
Commissioner Gassick, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up from before, was just to hear about the public process that went on before it was presented to UDC over the past couple of years, since it seems like the previous plan was presented in numerous public forums and different types of meetings. So I'd like to hear what sort of process happened beforehand, and then about when this change came about.
Yes, there was a public process. We started with this project in the fall of 2006, and we had ongoing public meetings, a website, presentations to the community council, and citizens advisory group. Mr. Spernak was a member of the citizens advisory group for the latter portion of the project planning, and Allison Hill from TLO at the time was on the Citizens Advisory Committee. And so, yes, the trees were presented to the public and all entities of being there, but it came to fruition through the civil design that with the 3-to-1 slope, there engineeringly has to be a stormwater collection system. The municipality will not be able to take out that system at this current state of the planning based on TLO's hope of having a permit and speculation of construction next year. There needs to be something more firm to go forward with that. It is a huge engineering decision. There's going to be a 3-to-1 slope of a large area that's going to have significant amount of snow melt and stormwater runoff, and we need a drainage system to collect that. And so there would be liability on behalf of the municipality if we did not put that in, speculating that TLO would take down the rest of the hill.
Was your retaining wall system code compliant?
Yes, it was. The retaining wall we only got to a concept design at that point. TLO came back early in the process and had a change of heart, which means they had, Allison Hill was no longer there, and Tim Spurnick took her position, and they had different concepts. Allison Hill had a more cottage forest on the hill concept. Tim Spurnick has a concept of leveling it and developing it. So that's why we worked with the property owner in that instance and took in consideration their request and eliminated the large retaining wall. And normally we would only put a 2-to-1 slope in, but per their request we're putting a 3-to-1 in. So we have worked with the property owner.
Actually, I think the final plan approved by the EDC does not include the retaining wall.
I was just trying to get at the how practical it is to have a code-compliant stormwater runoff situation. Commissioner Jones, you have a question?
Yeah, I do, and maybe it's for the landscape architect, but I was wondering how big this swale is and if there's a possibility of moving the trees back or forward a little bit, or using a water-tolerant species that maybe these aren't, so that you could have them, but have them, I mean, obviously they were in here.
Well,
They're coming out just based on the municipal forester saying they would not do well in the wet area.
right, and we're taking, Commissioner Joyner, that's a good comment, taking into consideration the trail, which is, we wanted to have 7 feet off the back of the curb where we could store snow, and we're running into, there's a little slight curve in the road in that area, so we're getting really close. That trail is getting really close to that public use easement. So to try to squeeze in those trees between that easement and the trail, it just didn't seem to make sense. I mean, we're using, in this plan, we're using the columnar aspen as well. Included in there, are the streetlights between that public use easement and the trail.
So to the north, that's not municipal property?
That's correct. That's the Trust Land Office property. That slope, that 3-to-1 slope that the municipality would grade back as per the request is their property.
Perhaps that, I suppose we couldn't plant municipal trees on their property if it was their desire to have them. They could plant trees.
If you look at the exhibit that we had submitted, that Exhibit A, the bottom one that says current plan, you can see the swale on there and relationship of where the trees would have gone, and it would have been right in the middle of that swale.
So can I ask a little more then? So the area behind the trees now, it's forested, but that'll all be graded?
That's correct. So as you see in the top plan, the green is all where we would kind of reseed what was cut back from existing forest.
So it would be so when the municipality would take out this row of trees, but it's the property owner that's going to remove
That's
the
correct.
trees that could be there, okay.
Well, as a part of this project, we would slope that grade back at 3-to-1. So anything that's showing up in that UDC approved plan at the top of that Exhibit A, that's all municipality work. Working with the Trust Land Office, they've agreed that they wanted that 3-to-1 slope. The municipality would do that work as a part of 40th Avenue, but that's still their property.
Other questions? You guys have a basic one. I guess this was aimed at staff. If we didn't have a land use dispute here, isn't there a standard? Why did we have continuous trees on both sides? Part of our task is to review roadway landscaping, and typically we would see landscaping where we have the roadway right-of-way. How is it that we're relieving that requirement here? Is it just because we ran out of room?
This is through the chair, this is a sort of a special road in the sense that the municipality or project management engineering is having to acquire all of the right-of-way for the full length of it, except for right at the ends, both ends. So if they're having to acquire right-of-way from private landowners, that's from the medical institutions, from the Trust Land Office, from private property owners, and then they could only acquire so much. And in addition to that, there's very steep topography in this one section of the road that we're discussing right now where those trees are. And so during the preliminary or the concept and the final review of this case, planning staff stressed very, very much to try and widen the road, try and fit in all the trails, and there's just limited space, the scarcity. And project management engineering has worked very, very hard to accommodate as much landscaping as possible and to accommodate all the things that are in the design criteria manual and the things that the commission requested during the earlier hearings. And this is just one of those hard choice places, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Garsha.
I can't really get a great grasp for what the topography is because there's no elevation lines and cuts, but I did have a question. So the concept is you're going to have a lot of water sheening off a hill, which you're probably going to have with some kind of wildflower vegetation, or what's the vegetation?
To give you some concept of how tall this cut will be, please envision the Tudor and Lake Otis retaining wall on the southwest corner. This will be about the height of this retaining wall and the cut we're making to this hill. We're actually making probably about a 35-foot cut from the top of the hill right now down to the road surface. So this is a large hill, and, and we are putting jute mat into the slope to stabilize it for sediment control and why the seed establishes.
Okay, so for your stormwater plan, you're not having a terrace, you're just going to put like wattles up and stuff for temporary. Is that going to be considered sufficient? So you're not terracing the water runoff?
Well, we'll have to track run it, but they will also be putting a biodegradable jute mat and then, over the topsoil and the seeding. So to help give the seed establishment. We're also doing a 3-to-1 slope. We would normally do a 2-to-1. We're doing a more gentle slope at this.
Okay. My other question is, was there any thought to doing like an elevated trail and sort of swapping where the trail is with the trees so that when the water runoff did hit down, like the swale would be on the south side of the trail and the trees would be on the road side? Is that something that's possible or just something that would be?
Having trees that close to back a curb really inhibits their survivability considering our winter environment and the snow storage requirements. So it was considered to put the trees in between the pathway and, the back of curb to keep them, but they would most likely not survive with the snowfall and the snow being pushed into the snow storage area.
I just was wondering if thought was given to it. Thank you.
Commissioner Joyner.
I'm sorry, I thought of another question, and I know that you probably haven't thought too far because you just found out about this, but in the swell, if the trees are coming out, is something else going to go in there? I mean, are there, like the rain garden concept where you have other kind of plants that would go in that would actually help treat the stormwater and reduce the amount, or is it just going to be grass, or could something go in there so it's not just a ditch?
Right now, what we're showing is, or what we're proposing is just the no-mow seed mix within that area. The whole hillside will get that mix as well as within the swale.
I mean, is that a reasonable thing that you wouldn't have trees, but you would have something else, or does that not make sense to you?
I guess, like Julie had noted, I mean, we're trying to follow all these different requirements and parameters in terms of the snow storage, and through the Area Wide Trails Plan, we're trying to put these trails on the north side of the road and separate them by at least 7 feet, and have a sidewalk on the south side, and then have trees to separate whatever that property is to the north of the trail. We're running out of space because in this area specifically, we've put a curve or a camber in the road to incorporate these terraced walls on the south side based on input from those medical facilities over on the south side of the road. So we're trying to reduce the size of those walls by moving that road, putting a curve in that road. So it's really restricting, just from the negotiations with the different landowners. This is kind of where we're at, and with that PUE line that's showing up there, it's just becoming really tight in terms of separation, and that's kind of what I was trying to do, is provide a screen when you're walking down the length of the roadway, that we have some sort of screen or some sort of vertical element, in this case the columnar aspen along that edge, so that it wasn't this abrupt change from the road to the property without any sort of vegetation in there.
I guess that's what I was asking. Is there something besides columnar aspen, some other kind of vegetation that could fit in that space that would serve that purpose, even if it's, I don't know, red twig dogwood or something that it's not trees? If the only reason the trees aren't going there is because they wouldn't do well, is there something else that could fit in the same space that would do well? And maybe I don't have an answer. I just had a question. Is that an option so that you do have, I mean, you can see the good reason for having some sort of separation.
Right.
One thing to consider here is there is a potential development concept from TLO. We found out about these comments at 4:30 today. We didn't have a chance to research all of this. We scrambled to get as much as we could together and get here. But per my recollection, I do believe that at some point in time, TLO probably discussed having driveways onto 40th Avenue. And so that would probably most likely happen. And so putting some things in here would be something that they would have to take out. There's no driveway curb cuts planned, but that seems to be, at this point, a feasible it seems to be feasible that they are going to probably move forward in the future with developing this property and putting in driveways. And they would most likely have several driveways onto 40th Avenue, And so
Although they're the ones who are asking for the trees to go in, so, yeah.
Again, we actually did not feel this was the appropriate venue to be discussing this particular one. It seems to be more of a discussion that should have been happening between TLO and PM&E administration, not in front of the UDC.
Any other questions?
I guess I could ask a question or two. I don't want to belabor it. It looks like the path on the north side is a multi-use paved trail, 8 feet wide or something like that. I can't quite see the entire length of the path on the north side, but on L1 of 100, it appears that the trail actually touches the back of curb. It kind of meanders a little bit around Piper, Dale, and then you guys separate it. I mean, I know that you guys, or it's desired to have 7 feet clear of sidewalk and landscaping for snow storage, but I have seen where the sidewalk or paved trail actually abuts the back of curb. Maybe it has a couple feet of stamped concrete or something like that, and then the trail. But if you did something like that, pulled the trail towards the back of curb in that area, that might give you the room to have some level area for the trees and then the swale.
Actually, we would probably hear more of a public outcry from bringing the pathway closer. To give you some perspective, this classification of road, per the official streets and highway plan and the design criteria manual, needs an 80 feet of right-of-way. Given the amount of development trying to extend this road through all these buildings, there is not 80 feet. We did this in 60. But the number one criteria that was expressed by the public through our public meetings, our input forums, and our Citizens Advisory Committee was to have a separated pathway on the north side. Between Lake Otis and Laurel, we were unable to do that with the flare. And at that point, that is the tightest area. We are literally right up next to buildings or right up to their patios. This trail on the north side connects to the Chester Creek Trail that is currently under construction, that's being upgraded. So it connects to that, it connects to Providence's Trail, and these connections are down at Dale Street, and it connects to the UA Spur Trail that goes over to the UA property to the east. And so the property owners along this corridor really wanted to have that separated trail, and I think we would be diminishing that and not taking that in consideration if we did move it closer.
Sure. You've looked at it globally, and its separated pathway is certainly something I'm an advocate of.
And again, like Julie stated, go down farther to the east end of the project where Dale Street is, where the residents are directly across from, directly in front of the improvements. We've actually, separated that trail and worked with Providence to provide as much separation as possible along there. So that in a nutshell, that area kind of defines what their feelings are in terms of that separated trail.
Okay. I have another question. It may be out of order, but it seems like this all happened at 4 o'clock today. It sounds like you guys might be amenable to working something out or discussing it with the Trust Land Office. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure what we've obviously heard what TLO wants us to do, and that's to deny it and go with the original plan, which would be planting 35 trees that are probably going to die.
Right.
And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I think, we've been talking with all these different owners and representatives of the owners, and we're willing to do that. This project, we're trying to get this project done for, start construction this year. It was supposed to start last year, and that did not happen. So we need to move the process along as quickly as we can.
To add to that, we are planning to take this project down to purchasing later this week or early next week and put it out to bid, hopefully with a July opening. So we're also we don't want for the UDC to extend a vote on this. We would rather see a vote tonight. But we are pretty adamant that we cannot take away this drainage feature from an engineering standpoint on the speculation of their development. They do not, from our understanding, have approved permits, nor have they awarded a construction contract. So there's still some challenges that they still need to go through to get to the point. We are willing to work with TLO to potentially resolve some of their concerns. We have an ongoing discussion with TLO. We're in more of an amicable eminent domain situation with 3 of their other parcels along this roadway. So that's why Bob Owens is here tonight. So we're willing to work with them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dinwiddie.
I guess my question would be, obviously with the schedule, this is a 2011 landscape installation, it would be pretty remarkable if these trees were even on the board for October. And 35 trees is on a $10 million job as change order material. My understanding from you guys is that in 2011, if things change, that you guys could re-talk with you're open to discussing this, and you have enough on a $10 million job. There's got to be something in there there's an open solution for this down the road that we may not be even privy to right now at this time.
That is correct.
Any other questions? I had another one for, I guess it would be directed at staff. Is it the nature of this tract that it would require perimeter landscaping by the property owner?
It's an excellent question. Well, if it's a 3-to-1 slope, it'd be hard to get landscaping in that location. I believe the property owned by the TLO is PLI. There's a lot of different zoning districts along here. Towards this end, there's some B3, but I think this is PLI, Public Lands and Institutions, and that does not require.
I thought PLI was just supposed to match the adjacent zoning districts.
While Francis is looking that up, it would really depend on what the site plan is, and I haven't seen the site plan and what their plans are for development, so it'd be difficult to answer.
I mean, one of the scenarios is they're planning on cutting this down so that you don't have this big 3-to-1 slope for 40 feet or whatever we're talking about.
Through the chair, perimeter and arterial landscaping is not required in this location.
If they located a parking lot in that area, then they would have to provide, landscaping around the perimeter of it.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we do a motion, and we can move to delay. I think we're safe within doing that, or we can move to, I guess if we reject this, it goes back to the original plan, just to summarize, or we can approve what was originally on the consent agenda to accept this amendment. But I think given the context and the complications of this, I am going to be looking for findings from all of the commission to support the vote that we have tonight. So be prepared for that. Sorry, Francis, you had something?
Mr. Chair, there's one other option, which is that you can add conditions of approval, because the department, the planning department, is recommending approval of the proposed amendments subject to condition 1, and that's that the amendments in exhibits A, B, C, D, and E. The commission could add conditions of approval should they choose to.
Okay, thanks for that. So if somebody wants to take a crack at a motion, and Commissioner Kimmer, if you don't use this electronic device, I'm going to come over there. Commissioner Garsha.
I think it'd be appropriate to approve the conformed plan. It appears to apply to the Anchorage Trail system and do its best to connect the trails. And based on the spacing that they have, it appears they've employed every option in regards to the Anchorage city zoning plans, and it seems like they're in conformance with all the landscaping items that address this commission. If And based on the sloping of that hill, currently they're performing the correct measures for the stormwater pollution prevention. So I motion to approve.
Okay, if I could have you back up just a second, just craft the motion, and then we can speak to the motion afterwards. So the motion is to approve the amended plan, subject to the condition, Department Recommendation 1. Okay?
Correct.
And that's been seconded by Commissioner Dinwiddie. Now you can speak to.
I feel everything I had previously said adequately addresses my concerns and comments. Thank you very much.
Okay. Findings, Commissioner Joyner. Yeah.
Well, if I understand the objection to it, I don't see that not planting the trees has any substantial impact on the landowner and impacts their development. And, I mean, there could be a condition, but I believe in the future, if that land development, if the changes occur on the adjacent property, then perhaps something could be planted at that point. But I don't understand that there's such a damage to the landowner that that the city should plant trees that are not likely to survive. I mean, it would have to be against my nature to not want to plant trees, but if they're not going to survive, it's a waste of money, and I don't think there's such a benefit to the landowner of having those, or a detriment to their development plans to having them, especially if there's forest land there that they could retain as a buffer of their own property, or they would have the option of planting on their own property. Then I think if the city feels that those trees shouldn't go there and they have good reasons for it, then we should support that.
Thank you. Mr. Dinwiddie?
I would suggest a condition be added to this motion to approve, in that if the landowner, and the date can be, May 15th, 2011, June 1st, 2011, if the landowner goes through with his plans and has the land conform to what he's presented to us, if it is that grading's done, that the municipality be open to revisiting these 35 trees as a change order to this plan, but it would be contingent upon the landowner having a set date to, they say they're going to do a fill and grade permit this fall and move dirt, but they have to have a certain, I think the condition has to be set on both. There's a date at which you have to have this thing done. You have to have your fill and grade in. You have to have some dirt moving, because this project will have a schedule as well. And if you meet that date, then the city should be open to revisiting these 35 trees.
So you're proposing a friendly amendment to the motion to, could you restate that again?
I would present a friendly amendment to the motion that if the landowner meets a certain timeline, whether it be May 15th, 2011 or June 1st, 2011, that they've got their grading in order, that it changes, these trees are survivable, that the city is open to planting them. Is that confusing enough?
Is that acceptable to the, is that acceptable to you?
No, that's not acceptable to me.
Okay, so we would...
Can I speak to that, or no? Or is that my only answer?
Well, I think if it's not acceptable to you, we'd put it to a vote to see if we... Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
I just feel that's a lot of ifs. This is something PM&E and TLO can probably work out on their own, and I don't necessarily feel it's a condition that we need to set. If there's permitting issues associated with TLO, and if they can't obtain their permits and do the things they need to do, then PM&E is responsible for certain SWIP measures, which they're installing. So should something happen on TLO's side, then they can work something out with PM&E. I don't think we're necessarily need to set any type of what was the word I'm looking for? Condition. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Kimmerer?
Yes, I'll be supporting the motion. I think best practice sets the trail back from the back of curb 7 feet, as the designers have done. I don't think there's any value in planting the trees if we've had a professional arborist tell us that they won't survive. I don't see anything that would tell me that if we do not plant the trees that anything in Title 21 would be violated, so I will support the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Gazik?
Yeah, I'll be supporting the motion too. I think the overall landscape plan meets the requirements outlined for UDC to review. I think the designers examined all the possible solutions in this narrow corridor to try and fit as many possible amenities in there as they could. Ideally, it would have been great to have those trees, but going through the public process that they worked through, it seemed like they fit in what was most needed by the community. But in addition to that, I'd also say that this is something that probably could have been resolved early on through this 4-year public process, and ideally I'd like to see that handled in that forum before it gets to UDC.
Thank you. Any objection to passing the motion? Hearing and seeing none, motion passes. Thank you. I know that the other case that was on the agenda tonight has been postponed. So we do have this ethics packet. Do you have something to tell us about that, Sharon?
Sorry. No, I don't have any information on it. I think Danielle had perhaps sent you an email explaining its purpose. And Jill may have something.
Yeah. There isn't any additional information other than the email that Danielle sent you, which included links to the applicable codes and the ethics information, as well as this PowerPoint presentation. In addition to that, we just wanted to check with everyone to see that you fill out your municipal declaration form on your financials. My understanding on that form as of yesterday morning is that you're required to fill that out upon initial appointment to the commission. Or if there's a change in your financial status, your declaration, then you would resubmit that form. And the only other time you would submit it would be if you were reappointed. So it's not an annual form. You don't have to do it every year.
Is this the form that we got an email about like 6 weeks ago saying it was accidentally sent to us and it was only supposed to go to planning and zoning? Or is that a different form?
There are two forms. There's the APOT form, which is with the state. And then the second one is a one-page form with the municipality, and it's called, hold on just a second, it's called a Disclosure of Present Economic Interest for Appointed Public Members. I have extra copies here. You should have filled that out and probably given it to the clerk's office when you were appointed. If you didn't, you need to fill one out, and I don't know who has and who hasn't. And if anything on that form has changed since you first were appointed, you need to fill it out again. Other than that, the only time you have to fill that form out would be if you were reappointed to the commission or your term was renewed, if you will. Does that make any sense?
It does. It's there needs to be a trigger. What's the consequences if you don't have all the forms filled out? Somebody to come hunt us down?
It's a requirement of being on the commission. It's required by code.
Right. But is someone at the municipal level keeping track of these records, whether they're on file or not?
Actually, yes.
Because I know for sure I can't remember, whether my forms are current.
I would have to check with Danielle on what her list was, but they were going through every board and commission and checking every one of them. That was my last understanding.
Could I request that we get a list at the next meeting of the people that have outstanding forms that need to be filled out?
We can email you
Okay.
if you haven't completed
Would
it.
it be possible that everybody fills out the form, and if they find out you've already submitted, they'll just throw one of those away?
We could do that, too.
Also, if you filled it out when you first were appointed and you've been reappointed several times.
Yeah.
Reappointment goes through the assembly, so it's just like being appointed to the commission again, and that's why they require a new form to be completed each time you're reappointed.
Okay.
At least that was my understanding.
Yeah. If I did this more than 2 months ago, I don't remember it, so.
I understand. We'll get the information. But if anybody needs a copy of the form, I do have extras with me.
Okay. All right. Any other things for tonight's meeting?
I don't have anything.
I have not been contacted by anybody at the Parks Commission to make a presentation on porta potties or...
You might send an email to Suzanne.
Okay. A little reminder, I'm getting the feeling that they're not all that interested in really our presentation because...
You're getting the feeling, huh?
Yeah. Nor have I heard anything back from the city on the letter that we submitted for artwork on UAA. I don't know if you have any pull with those.
Yeah, I had talked some months ago, and they were pretty irritated that I was continuing to badger them about that. So I can maybe pursue that and badger them again tomorrow or sometime soon.
Okay. Any other things that need to be discussed tonight? All right, well, motion to adjourn. Commissioner Joyner, second. Commissioner Garsha. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing seen none, we're adjourned.